There is a paradox at the heart of how to measure a life's impact. By the measure of military success, by the standards of territorial control, of battles won and enemies defeated. Khushal Khan Khattak's story is one of failure. The Great Pashtun Revolt that he organized and inspired, that forced Aurangzeb himself to abandon his court and travel to the frontier, that made the greatest empires in South Asia bleed for 5 years. It failed. The coalition disintegrated. His son betrayed him. By 1677, the Khattak faction was splintered. The tribes were bought off one by one, and the Mughal administrative apparatus reasserted its control over the northwestern frontier. He died in exile, displaced from power, his tribal chieftainship in the hands of a son he had tried to raise to understand the obligations of Pashtunwali. But who had chosen Mughal gold instead? If history were measured only in the geography of military operations, if success meant holding territory and bending enemies to your will, then Khushal Khan Khattak would be a cautionary tale. A brave man, a clever strategist, but ultimately a defeated one. Except he was measuring something else entirely. Look at the 4 geographic zones on this slide. They trace the arc of cultural influence. Not military conquest, but something more durable. Khattak territory. The tribal lands along the Indus at Akora. This was the epicenter. This is where his power was rooted. This is where he lived and ruled and composed. Militarily, this was where he lost. But culturally, this was where the warrior-poet tradition took root, where his sons and grandsons continued his literary work, where the Khattak tribe became, for the next 2 centuries, the living archive of classical Pashto literary practice. Peshawar and the Swat Corridor, the broader Pashtun belt of the Peshawar Valley, and the mountain passes connecting it to the highlands. This was the operational theater of the Great Pashtun Revolt. His verses were recited and memorized in the hudras of every major tribe here. His war poetry shaped the emotional landscape of tribal mobilization. And though the military revolt failed, the cultural memory of it never did. Centuries later, when Pashtun political movements needed a historical precedent for unified resistance, this geography, this moment, was where they looked. Kabul and Afghanistan. His intellectual influence extended beyond the tribal belt of his immediate military operations to the wider Pashto-speaking world. Kabul, the capital of the Afghan kingdoms, had its own Pashtun Uspa aristocracy, its own literary circles, its own engagement with the classical tradition Khushal Khan was forging. His verses circulated there. His ideas about the warrior-poet synthesis, about Pashtunwali as Islamic ethical obligation, about the proper response of honorable men to unjust rule. These ideas crossed mountain ranges and tribal boundaries because they articulated something that transcended any single tribe's grievance. And the global diaspora, because here is the final irony. In the modern era, while Khushal Khan Khattak has become the most celebrated figure in Pashto literary tradition across a global Pashtun diaspora scattered from Peshawar to London, from Kandahar to Washington, D.C. His verses have been translated into English, studied in universities, cited by politicians and activists. He has become the intellectual ancestor of modern Pashtun nationalism, a phenomenon he could never have imagined living in his mountain valley in the 17th century. This is the crucial distinction. He failed to hold Khattak territory against the Mughal Empire, but he successfully conquered the permanent cultural geography of the entire Pashto-speaking world. He did not create a dynasty that would rule the mountains. He created a literary and intellectual tradition that would outlast empires. But the minarets represent the institutional transmission of culture across centuries, a transmission that has nothing to do with military power or territorial control, and everything to do with the deep structures through which a people remember who they are. Khushal Khan Khattak's rebellion failed militarily in 1677, but it succeeded historically in a way that military victory never could have achieved. He made his people conscious of themselves, and that consciousness never requires an empire's permission to endure.